I've never seen a minotaur crush a human to death, but I assume that they'd get really squishy or something, or like an old banana, maybe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Risen Empire. I'm your host, David.
And I am Ethan.
Let's take a look at all the details, references, and secrets in the second episode of the brand new Disney Plus adaptation of Percy Jackson by Rick Riordan. Mm-hmm. I hope you're all comfortable because this episode has a lot to go over.
Could take a while.
Yeah, it's doing a lot of world building to get us ready for the rest of the series. And we really tried to get you every detail we could. So hang out and let's get started.
Now, the title of this episode, I Become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom, is taken directly from Chapter 6 of the novel. As we pointed out last week, the title of each episode is pulled from the book, which is pretty cool. The episode actually begins much the same way this section does in the book, with Percy fading in and out of consciousness.
Okay.
And after awakening, Percy finds Grover next to his bed, clearly feeling responsible for the fate of Percy's mother at the end of the previous episode.
Sure. So then we're introduced to our first proper god of the series as Percy meets camp director Mr. D, or Dionysus, played, I think, brilliantly by Jason Mantzoukas. Some of our viewers may actually recognize him as the voice of Jankum Pog from Star Trek Prodigy.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Which I've mentioned a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
That's available right now on Netflix. Prodigy's a whole different story we'll be getting into down the road in a whole different video. It was a mess.
At some point, yeah.
Yep, and season 2 is going to be coming out real soon. We'll be breaking down every episode for you, episode by episode, all the Easter eggs, references, secrets, everything we can find for that.
Awesome, excited for that. But let's get back to Percy Jackson.
Sure.
Jason Mantzoukas absolutely steals this whole scene.
Yeah, he really does.
He's great as Mr. D. After Percy introduces himself and Mr. D starts messing with him, calling him the wrong name. What does he call him exactly again?
So it was one of my favorite lines from the series, but he's sitting there completely motionless, and Percy walks up, and without moving at all, like it looks like he's passed out, he goes, "Peter Johnson is here."
That's what it is.
I loved it. And I think that's from the book.
Yeah, he does stuff like that in the book, too.
Yep.
I mean, he convinces Percy that he's his father in the show, which is kind of messed up.
It is really messed up. And like this poor kid, he's just been put through the ringer. His mother dies, or at least seems that way.
Yeah.
His whole world's flipped upside down. His sense of reality is all gone. And then he's being gaslit in like the most horrible imaginable way.
Literally.
You know, he's spent his entire life wondering who his dad is, why his dad's gone, what to do. And that scene where Jason Mantzoukas goes, "Son," and Percy goes, "Dad?" And he goes, "Yeah." Like, just, oh my God, it was brilliant. The look on everybody's face was perfect.
It was perfect delivery. It was
and he's
great.
got just this crazy god in a Hawaiian shirt just screwing with him, trying to get a bottle of wine, which is totally different in the book anyway.
That's tangential, but it's hard not to feel bad for him. It really is. But while Mr. D is trying to convince Percy to get him his wine, we see Mr. Brunner in his true form for the first time as the centaur Chiron. Now, in mythology, Greek mythology, Chiron was the leader of the centaurs, and he was considered to be a great teacher.
He was considered a great teacher. One of the strongest elements of this series, at least in my opinion, and what really drew me into it, is how carefully crafted all the connections with real Greek myths are. Well, real Greek myths, it's a contradiction.
The real stories.
But the real stories,
you
know, and how carefully that lore is integrated in everything Rick Riordan wrote for this series. I grew up reading the Greek myths. I studied them extensively in school for years, and they are some of my favorite parts of human culture.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of why I loved this growing up. We may actually do a video series exploring some of the connections between the different characters in this series and actual Greek mythology.
That could be pretty cool, yeah.
It's like Hercules by Disney. Great movie, love it. You know, I really can go the distance too. But Zeus and Hera were not terribly close.
No.
Most of Greek mythology can be summed up with Zeus saw a woman and Hera was mad. It's not really explored very well in that movie.
No.
So we may dig into that a little further as we explore through Percy, but we'll talk about some of those connections as we go through these episodes and how they connect with actual mythology.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to go through this whole scene line by line here, the one with Mr. D and Chiron and Grover and Percy, partially because we don't really have time for it, mostly because he won't let me.
And he would, too.
I really would. It's absolutely brilliant. I was laughing. I thought it was hysterical. I watched this scene like 4 times. I want an entire series just dedicated to Mr. D, with Jason Mantzoukas as our central character, exploring his whole thing. Like, Disney, just take my money.
I'm down for that.
Oh, completely.
Well, next up, we get our first few real shots of Camp Half-Blood.
Yep.
Which looks awesome.
It really does.
It looks so
it's
good.
So nice.
Tons of people all over the place. It feels really lived in, fleshed out. It's really cool to explore it with Percy as we do.
It does, and it's such a tiny detail, but I love that the t-shirts are perfect. They're perfect.
They're awesome.
The costume design, which we'll get into a little bit later, in this series is top-notch.
It really is.
Truly exceptionally well done. I think this version of Camp Half-Blood is so much more immersive than it was in the movie. That really just felt like a backyard Ren fair.
Yeah.
It was terrible. So I thought this looked so much more like it does in my mind.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot.
For sure. And as Percy is walking with Chiron, we learn a few of the rules of this universe and this story. The camp is protected from both ordinary people and monsters. Ordinary people can't see it, and monsters can't get in.
Okay.
Magical objects like the pen don't obey the physical laws of the ordinary world.
Yep.
Which explains the wheelchair that Chiron had been using during the previous episode. And that's all a bit more fleshed out in the book, how the wheelchair actually works with him.
It is, yeah. It's like a black hole sort of
It
thing.
like sucks up his horse bits.
Yep.
Which
Jesus.
Hey.
Well, this one's getting demonetized. Assuming that ever happens anyway.
You know.
So we do learn that the camp's broken up into 12 cabins.
Yes.
One for each of the primary gods of Olympus. The cabins look great. They actually looked a little different in my mind.
Me as well. I expected more. I don't even know. It just looks like they took some Pantheon buildings and just pasted them in the middle of a forest.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think in the book it's described more as like a causeway with the buildings set along it.
I thought it was. They were like supposed to be in a row, and there was a road, and it was, yeah.
They were. It's a small semantic difference, but I live on semantics.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
This is very true.
It's so true. My kids are even worse, and it is my curse, and I brought this upon myself. So each demigod in the camp is then assigned to their parents' cabin. They live with all their half-siblings.
Right.
And kind of work as like a team in the camp, competing against and working with the other cabins.
Sure.
Not everybody's assigned to a cabin. It's only the kids that have been chosen by their parents.
Sure.
Whose parents have decided that their children are worthy of their affections. We're not going to get into that whole subplot issue with the entire concept of Percy Jackson.
There's a whole psychological series of videos we could do there.
There is, but we won't, because neither
We're
of
not
us
gonna
is
do that.
qualified for that.
Nor do we want to.
No. So we learn that only kids who are claimed are put into houses. Percy hasn't been claimed yet. He doesn't know who his godly parent is. So Percy gets assigned to the cabin of Hermes, along with all of the other unclaimed kids.
Sure.
In mythology, Hermes is the god of travelers.
Okay.
He's the god of vagrants, of people who have no place. So that's an awesome connection. Again, Rick Riordan really brings that mythos in.
Makes a lot of sense.
So well. And he's also the god of thieves, which is an interesting connection that could become a little more significant
Perhaps.
later on in the series.
It could, yeah.
We'll have to see.
I guess so. Now, as Percy gets settled in the cabin of Hermes, he meets some of the other demigods, and we're introduced to Luke, played by Charlie Bushnell, another key character. Luke tells Percy that he is an actual son of Hermes, one that's been claimed, but that all are welcome in that cabin.
He does, and it's a really nice scene. That part happens a little bit later, but it's connected. Yeah. In the scene, it's really brief, but you can see the trauma that Percy's endured.
Yeah.
When Luke walks up to him and just says, "Hey, you're the new kid, right?" Or whatever he says. And Percy jumps up and he's like, "Look, I've had such a long day. Can we just do this tomorrow? I can't do it."
Yeah.
It's so well sold. And, you know, Percy's instantly defensive. He's automatically expecting to get bullied again. But instead, Luke offers him kindness.
Yeah.
And I love that Luke is the first person to offer him kindness. There's a lot of interesting reasons for that. If you've read the books, you may understand why that's interesting. So Walker Scobell blows me away every time he's on screen. Young actors and actresses can rarely really transcend beyond make-believe into something sincere that makes you really believe that they've experienced the things you're seeing.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see what this kid's future is going to hold, what his career could be. Some of you may actually recognize him from The Adam Project from 2021.
Okay.
He played opposite Ryan Reynolds. I know you haven't seen that movie yet.
I have not, but I've heard a lot about it.
We've got to break that movie down. From a sci-fi standpoint, it's incredible anyway. But he was 12 years old when they filmed that.
That's crazy.
And Ryan Reynolds is a hard actor to keep up with for seasoned veteran adult actors.
For anybody.
And that kid keeps up with him absolutely every step of the way.
Yeah.
And even steals the spotlight at some point.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to see. If you haven't seen that movie, I really encourage it. It's worth every second of your time. But he does such a great job in this show.
I'm going to have to watch that movie at some point. Yeah.
It's so worth it.
Walker was actually cast as Percy that same year.
He was, yep.
He was only 13 when filming started. Yet another important difference in this adaptation. Readers will know that Percy was 12 at the beginning of The Lightning Thief, which is the name of the first book. And he's 13 in the show, so little difference there.
It is, but it's so nice that it's so much closer. That first live action adaptation from 2010, it aged up all the characters so badly. Percy was played by a 16-year-old named Logan Lerman, who, I mean, he did an okay job. It's derided, but it could have been worse.
Yeah.
If you've seen The Dark Tower, I know I rant about it. It's just a nightmare.
It is.
But the fandom, and myself included, really, really disliked that key change in the book.
Yeah.
It kind of ruins a lot of the childish wonder of the series, you know?
That can make a lot of sense, yeah.
Aging kids up is such a difficult choice. Like the Game of Thrones series
Absolutely.
does age up the kids a bit, but they were actually cast much closer to their ages in the book.
Yeah.
And it just took so long for them to find really solid kids that could lead a series, could grow with it.
Yeah.
And who could act. And the casting process for that is a whole different video we could get into.
Oh, yeah.
And probably should, actually.
That would be interesting.
The behind-the-scenes stuff from that movie is amazing. Actually, the podcast, It Was a Shit Show, does an amazing job digging into the pilot for Game of Thrones.
Okay, cool.
And totally recommend them. They're an awesome series, too. It Was a Shit Show. So after that, we follow Grover into the woods. And I noticed that they go to really great lengths to keep Grover's legs off screen.
They do.
He's always filmed just from the waist up, or like something's in the way. And it's like 2 seconds you see his legs. They're like, look, remember, he has legs.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it's crazy expensive to keyframe stuff like that. You know more about that side of this.
Oh, yeah. It's not an easy process to put goat legs on a person. It sounds easy, but it's not.
No, it doesn't sound easy. Dude, I could spend 5 years sitting at a computer, and the best I'd get is like a photoshopped half a goat for one image, much less a video.
Yeah.
So, I just thought that was funny.
That is really
interesting cinematographical. That's not a word.
That's not a word, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
It is. And again, through the whole series, through this whole episode, you see everything's shot from a kid's perspective.
Yeah, it is. It's still keeping with that perspective.
Still loving that choice for cinematography, and I think it's
really
great.
cool.
I hope they keep it for the entire series.
Yeah.
And don't abandon it later on.
Who knows? I guess we'll have to watch and see.
Yep.
So Grover has a meeting with these shadowy figures we later learn are known as the Council of Cloven Elders, who are referenced in the book.
That was cool.
Yeah, and he goes on to find Mr. D and Chiron playing Pinochle, which is also a nice little nod to the book.
Yeah, it is. I loved that. That was such a big part in the book.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a silly focus. I wonder if Rick Riordan played it with his grandparents growing up or something.
It's possible. But he tells them what he's figured out about Percy's mother, which is when Grover was at the council, he learned that Percy's mother may not have been killed.
Yep.
But rather pulled into the underworld by Hades. Now, Mr. D and Chiron are both already aware of this, and they strongly forbid Grover from telling Percy about this.
He doesn't like that at all.
He doesn't like that at all.
Not
He's
at
angry. They claim that the truth can be very dangerous if it isn't handled carefully.
And this whole thing, one of my favorite lines from this entire episode, when they're talking to Grover and they're like, Grover's trying to explain what he thought and what he figured out. And he goes, I've never seen a Minotaur crush a human before, but I just assumed they'd get like really squishy or something, or like maybe like an old banana maybe. Oh my God, I was laughing so hard. I rewound that like 3 times.
That was funny. But it's because his mother kind of exploded like the Minotaur did.
Yeah, she turned into like a golden Thanos dust.
Yeah, she poofed.
Yep.
But Grover is obviously unhappy that he can't tell Percy that his mother may still be alive. He doesn't want to keep lying to his friend, who can blame him. Mr. D then gets kind of dark. We get a little foreshadowing.
There's a good shift, yep.
Yeah, there's a little shift there. We get some foreshadowing for the plot for the season as he tells Grover, quote, dark forces are gathering that want to destroy the world. We're going to see more about that later in the episode.
Yeah, and all through the series, too.
Yeah.
He went really dark for a minute, which
really
I love.
Dark.
He does such a great job at just flipping instantly from this, like, jovial, kind of dismissive, like, blasé, doesn't care.
Yeah, it's kind of unsettling the way he can just flip that switch.
Yeah,
but it's
to totally serious and dour.
Yeah.
Absolutely deadpan in an instant. Which, again, just hallmark of a great actor.
He is. I'm loving Mr. D so far.
I love seeing the actors from Star Trek Prodigy getting out there.
Yeah.
Got another actress from Star Trek Prodigy appearing in the Fallout adaptation.
Oh, yes.
Which
I
we've been
remember that.
talking about.
Yep.
We've got another video exploring the trailer for that, too.
Yes, we do. Which we'll link somewhere up there.
Sure will. Or we'll try to.
We will try to remember. Next, Percy awakens from yet another nightmarish dream.
Yep, a couple of those in the series so far.
He's had several. Luke once again consoles him, telling them that demigods just kind of process reality differently. He says a lot of them have recurring nightmares. ADHD, dyslexia, a lot of them do. And for the first time in his life, he's actually just like everybody else.
It's cool. I love that they bring the elements of neurodivergence into the series and that they did take that from the books.
Yeah.
Because it's a central part of Percy's character. Mm-hmm. And it's also a central part of why Rick Riordan wrote this series. Mm-hmm. One of his sons was diagnosed fairly young with ADHD. Okay. And we're talking 20 plus years ago when it was treated very differently than it is now. And he wanted to show his son that there was someone out there like him.
Sure.
Because there aren't, like we talked about last week, there aren't any major characters out there with that level of neurodivergence that ever talk about it.
That's true.
It's implied, it's shown, you can certainly tell that some characters have it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's never a central part of who they are.
That's true.
And it absolutely can be for those of us that suffer from those things.
Yeah, it's really cool to see.
And Luke really goes out of his way to welcome Percy and make sure that he feels really comfortable at camp and safe. And I think Percy's really starting to trust him a lot.
Yeah.
Something that progresses even farther as the episode goes on.
It does. Then about 10 seconds later, Percy learns that not everybody in camp is quite as warm.
Was quick.
Yeah. When he meets Clarice, a daughter of the war god Ares, and she's played by Dior Goodjohn. She knocks Percy down, and Luke jumps right to his defense.
Does, instantly. Yep. No miss on that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the juxtaposition of little moments like that in this series. I've noticed they've done a few of those. In the first episode, we got one mystical beast.
Yeah.
And it was the Minotaur, it was danger, it was everything that a nightmare can be. Mm-hmm. And in this episode, we get another mystical beast. And only one other mystical beast. And it's Chiron.
Yeah, yeah.
As a centaur, as a guide, as someone who's safe, as someone there to help Percy.
Sure.
And I love that juxtaposition. Same with, hey, you're safe, you're just like us, you're going to be good here, you're just like everyone else, and then immediately knocked down and messed with. And Luke starts explaining to Percy that if he wants respect at the camp, he's going to have to win glory. And glory is almost spoken of with like a big G in this series, as like a thing that you can get, something tangible. And he starts trying to help Percy figure out what he's good at.
Sure.
This is another sequence that I was laughing at.
It was very funny, yeah.
A couple of these were in the trailer, which we had talked about as well.
Yep.
He's definitely not an archer. He is definitely not a blacksmith.
Nope.
Which, for anybody who knows anything about Greek mythology, they're knocking off potential parents as we're going through this episode, showing us things that are probably not going to be his parents. He's probably not a son of Hephaestus, for example, if you're familiar with Greek mythology. Man lit the whole black shop on fire.
That's true.
That was awesome.
Yeah, that was funny.
That was awesome.
All of this is a little different in the book. The altercation with Clarice comes a bit later, and Annabeth is there, not Luke. So a bit of a different
I
situation.
thought it seemed, I remembered it a little bit differently than it was in the show.
Yeah, and again, different order. Everything's in a different order. But it's also Chiron who tries to teach him archery rather than just being part of a general lesson, it seems.
Okay, I assume it also went poorly in the book.
Yes. I believe an arrow ended up in Chiron's tail.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
I thought something like that
Yes.
had happened. And I love the end of that whole thing too. When Percy's sitting there at like lunch or whatever, he looks at me and goes, "Is there a Greek god of disappointment? You know, maybe someone should ask him if he's missing a kid." That's another one I laughed so hard at.
That was really funny.
And then they're like, "Well, there's the goddess of failure." Little moments like that are so good. And it's one of the best things about having a series instead of a movie, that they can take the moments to just kind of expand the characters.
Right,
and
you're
have a
not
little
capped
fun.
at 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
So next here at lunch, Percy notices that people are burning random stuff at a pyre, kind of in the middle of where they're eating. And Luke explains that you burn an offering to the gods, and they're more likely to listen to you. Apparently, it's supposed to be something that you're going to miss the most.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense with what we see in the series, too.
It does. So in the next scene, Percy burns some of that blue candy that we talked about last week, and offers a prayer, kind of a commune with his mother. He tells her that he started making friends at camp and that he intends on finding his father.
I thought that was another really beautiful scene, too.
It was really well done.
Walker Scobell does such a great job through all of this. And as Percy returns to his cabin, he is ambushed by Clarice and her lackeys, for lack of a better term, who just drag him into a bathroom and start... And I thought this was interesting because I don't... No, this is the same way in the book where she's accusing him of like making it up to try to get clout and...
I don't think so, because he has the Minotaur horn with him in the book, and she's just essentially saying, if you're going to be a big deal, you need to be tough, essentially.
Oh, so she's bullying him for having done it instead
believe
of for
so.
having made it up. So it amounts to the same.
Pretty much, yeah.
Sure. In the book, she's also described as wearing, and I remember this very distinctly, a camo jacket.
Yes.
That's one of her big things. And she's not wearing in the show. I even went back and checked, and I was disappointed by that.
No, well, a little
For all the
oversight there.
care that they put into the costume design, like that's such a big part of her.
That's kind of
And I
weird.
was disappointed with that. So when they try to shove his head into the toilet, the water reacts to his presence right away.
Yep.
It recedes from him down the drain. And then geysers just erupt from the toilet. And they blow this really oddly kind of smooth hole shape in the door.
Yeah.
Which drives me nuts in movies. And they do it all the time where like somebody's like, I got to pack a C4 and it forms a perfect door shape.
That's not how explosions work.
It's not how anything works.
No, it's not
and
how
if you
pressurized
look,
water works.
the door is perfectly untouched on the ground.
That's true.
That drives me nuts.
Just blew out the stall around the door.
And I hate that. It's like a perfect shot. But other than that, the effect looks great.
Honestly, yeah, the effects look great. I mean, obviously, for the first part, they just pointed a camera at a toilet and flushed it.
Yeah, that's probably exactly what they did.
That's probably exactly what they did for the first part. But the actual blasts of water, those tentacle-looking things, I thought they looked really good.
I thought so too. So
Yeah.
they blast Clarice and her friends across the room and like into the sinks or whatever. And then they go running off.
Yep, and Percy turns and sees Annabeth, who I believe he's kind of meeting now for the first time.
Yeah, she appeared in that like dream sequence of the when he's shuffling at the beginning.
When he was kind of coming back and forth into consciousness, she's the one who said that he drools when he sleeps.
Okay, yeah, that's right. She said that in the book too.
Yeah. So Annabeth, played by Leah Jeffries, tells Percy she's been kind of stalking him to see if he could help her do something.
That was another one where he's like,
She's very upfront about it.
yeah, he's like, have you been stalking me? And yes,
Yes.
just great. The casting in this is amazing.
It is, and she does a great job as Annabeth. She immediately fits that character for me.
She does. She's got just the right attitude for it.
Yeah.
And so she tells him that she's been watching him because she wants his help to win Capture the Flag.
That's her story.
That's her story. Yeah. And obviously we know as we watch more of the episode.
Right.
Hopefully you've seen the episode. I don't know what you're doing here if you haven't.
Yeah, I guess spoilers? I mean, if you've made it this far in, that's kind of a little late for that, but, you know.
I feel like that's wicked late for that flag. So it turns out later, as we learn, she's been waiting for someone to fulfill a prophecy. And she thinks that Percy is going to be the person who can do that for her.
Okay.
To help get her out of the camp, to help move her story along.
Okay, that makes some sense. Next, we get a bit of Luke's backstory as he tells Percy about being homeless before getting to Camp Half-Blood. We also get some rather significant foreshadowing for the rest of the series. We won't get into any spoilers here, but the readers will probably know who we're talking about.
I love that they're dribbling these things in through the series, too.
Yeah.
Little touches for those of us that know what they're talking about
Yeah,
and how
it's
they
great.
come up. So the pact that he mentions here between the three primary gods are the three major sons of Kronos.
Sure.
It's Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon.
Okay.
In the Greek myths, they are kind of at the center of a lot of the stories. Not everything, of course, but a lot of it.
Right.
And in this story, they've all agreed not to have children because their kids are too powerful. Just like Luke talks about during that little chat there where he mentioned the girl that he met that was the daughter of Zeus.
Sure.
Forbidden kids are just more powerful and more dangerous.
Okay.
Part of what we see with Percy and his powers.
Right, for sure.
So at the end of the episode, we see where this kind of connects with Percy's story, given that, and again, I assume you've seen this, given that he's the son of Poseidon,
Right.
a forbidden kid, which is just a hell of a weight to lay on a kid.
Right? It really is.
But again, I'm not going to get into all of that here. That's a whole different video for a very different channel to do. So I love all the notes.
Yeah.
Connecting everything back and forth. This episode's really heavy on backstory and a lot of exposition, but it
Right.
doesn't really ever feel bogged down.
No, it has a nice flow.
It moves well from point to point, and I was fully engaged.
Yeah.
Start to finish through the whole episode.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Obviously, a lot of these moments happen differently in the books, and it's just how an adaptation is going to be. But the series has really been streamlined well. I think it actually flows a little more organically in some areas than the books might.
It's an easier to digest story, especially if you've never read the book.
Yeah,
You're getting the points as they fit together.
sure, yeah.
A lot of it in the book kind of happens backwards and all around, and there's a lot of mystery to it
Yeah,
that doesn't really need to be there.
right. Makes sense. Makes a lot of
So
sense.
next we move on to the big action sequence
Mm-hmm.
of the episode where they're going to play Capture the Flag, which is something I've really been looking forward to.
Yeah,
Because this sequence drove me nuts in the movie from 2010. The choreography was amateurish. The costumes all looked like they were bought at Spirit Halloween at best.
well, this time we can see what the Disney budget can do for a show like this.
Which is such a difference. It's amazing.
All the armor is well fit. It looks worn. It looks sturdy. The costume designer, Tish Monahan was her name. She did a fantastic job with this. It makes the series so much more immersive.
So nice. I'm loving it.
It is. It's great. That sequence where Grover meets the Dryad was another great example of that, where she's blended, the Dryad is blended right into the tree with some help of awesome prosthetic work. Maybe a little help of CGI too, but some great prosthetics.
That was a great scene. You noticed her before I did.
I did. I was kind of taken aback at first when I first saw it.
I had to go back to watch it to notice her, and I still can't tell if it was fully
I'm not
prosthetics
sure.
for
I'm
that
not
whole
sure.
thing. So I love that they kind of abandoned the usual trope of having most of the main characters go without their helmets,
Right.
which drove me crazy in the movie.
Yeah.
None of the characters that had plot armor ever wore a helmet.
Yeah.
And yes, there are some sequences in here, like in literally the very next scene after I had that thought. Neither of the main characters on scene have one.
That's true.
But it's Percy who's all distracted and wasn't wearing any of his armor.
That's true. There's a reason for it.
And Clarice, who's a hothead.
Right.
So kind of makes sense she'd want to be showing off not wearing that helmet and looking all bad and tough.
Makes a lot of sense.
And I love the trope in a movie or a show or a book or whatever where somebody's like, oh, don't worry about so-and-so. He's got it covered. We know we can count on him. And it cuts to that person totally unprepared and absolutely not ready. And here, Percy, Luke is like, oh, we don't have to worry about Percy. He'll be ready. I know he will. And we cut to Percy standing on a hill flossing. Just chilling. And then he's like laying on a log, just relaxing.
Just staring up at the sky.
No helmet, no shield, no sword.
No, so naturally he gets attacked.
He does.
By Clarice and her minions, and Percy is pretty quickly outmatched. He gets cut a few times, knocked down, and down a hill onto the beach. It's a whole thing.
Again, we see things Percy's not strong at.
Yeah.
Probably not a son of Ares, not terribly warlike. The choreography in this series is something I really wanted to touch on. It is so much better than it was in that movie.
It's really well done.
I've shown you some clips from the movie. We'll watch it and after this series is over, we'll be doing some comparisons looking at the two. But the choreography in this is on par with almost anything you can find out there.
Yeah, it's really good.
And again, these are all kids.
Yeah.
Genuine kids out there acting on screen. And it looks so much better. And a big part of that, I think, too, is the sound design.
Oh, yeah. It's a great sound design for the entire
Well
series.
done.
Yeah.
Immersive. Not necessarily the music. That kind of actually bugged me a little bit.
Really?
At parts through this. It felt a little cliched and forced.
Okay, sure. I can
From
understand
time to time.
Yeah. Well, as the episode winds to a close, Annabeth appears and shoves Percy into the water.
That poor kid.
I know. He's just having a great day already, right?
He really is. And just everybody's messing with him.
He is.
He doesn't know which way to go. He doesn't know if he's coming or going.
But what happens as he stands back up, his cuts and scrapes start to heal across his body, and suddenly a giant glowing trident appears above his head, revealing him to be the forbidden child of Poseidon that we were talking about earlier.
That was another scene that I hated so much in the movie.
Oh, yeah?
That movie actually did a great job with water effects. I'll give it a ton of credit for that. Most of the water in that movie was awesome.
Yeah.
But the scene where he heals, touching the water, he like touches it and it like snakes and spirals like up. It's very corny. It's very 2000s.
Yeah.
A lot of the effects from that movie did not age well. Although the water, like I said, was good. The trident over Percy's head in the Disney series here, exactly what I saw in my mind in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. It was perfect.
Pixel perfect.
100%. After being claimed, Percy learns that he's been blamed for the theft of a mystical weapon that he didn't steal.
Our MacGuffin for the season.
Our MacGuffin for the season, yep.
Yeah.
So Zeus believes that Percy, as the forbidden child of his jealous brother Poseidon, stole the Master Bolt, which is Zeus's primary weapon, and has threatened to go to war with Poseidon if it's not returned by the summer solstice, which is only a week later.
So Percy has a week to find the underworld.
Yep.
Effectively, as we go through the episode here.
Yep.
So in true Greek myth fashion, and I love this, Percy immediately rejects the call to adventure.
I didn't really think of that.
Doesn't hesitate at all. He's like, I'm not doing that. No way.
No way. So Mr. D and Chiron tell Percy that it's possible that the third brother, Hades, may have been the one to steal it.
Which makes more sense anyway.
It does. It makes a lot more sense
whatever.
given Greek mythology that we know. And that Percy must go on this quest to the underworld to attempt to retrieve it, and that he must take 2 others with him.
I love that it's Grover who gets to convince him and tell him about his mother.
Yeah.
Grover was
Much to the chagrin of Mr. D.
another, absolutely love him
Yeah.
so much. So Grover at the beginning of this episode was so upset and blames himself so much for the apparent death of Percy's mother, Sally.
Apparent death.
And I love that he gets that closure.
Yeah.
That he gets to be the one to tell his friend, hey, it's good. And then he gets to be honest with Percy.
Yeah. I love that. It's really fitting. So Mr. D and Chiron are demanding that Percy go on this quest, like seriously going at him. And he just keeps refusing. He doesn't want to do it. His dad never cared about him, so why should he try and save his dad? Which, I mean, is probably a reasonable argument.
I get it. He feels abandoned. He feels left behind.
Especially as someone in his situation. He says, I'm Sally Jackson's son. She's the one who cared enough to call herself my mother. And they're basically screaming at each other. And as they're screaming at each other, Grover breaks in and tells Percy that his mother may still be alive.
And how calm Grover is when he comes in and he just says, hey, everybody.
Yep.
He, again, so well cast.
He
He's
is.
a little more chaotic in the book.
He's very chaotic in the book.
He
Yeah.
eats cans.
He does. I'm kind of sad that they left that out.
I know. I wish they'd brought a little more of that into it. But I get it. It's
For those
a
who
little...
don't know, in the books, Grover likes to eat aluminum cans.
And basically anything he can get his hands on. So
As goats do.
Grover really is so loyal to Percy and such a good friend.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, Dionysus, Mr. D, like, he's kind of played as a joke in the series, but, I mean, he's a god.
Right.
You know, if you take the series as it is, he's a literal god to these people. And he totally goes against what he was ordered to do
Yep.
just to give Percy that bit of hope. So Grover tells Percy his mother was probably taken to the underworld by Hades, which is the same place Mr. D and Chiron want him to go in the first place.
Right.
And as he's explaining this to Percy, his whole demeanor shifts through the conversation.
Yeah.
Again, Walker Scobell just blowing it out.
A lot of acting going on without saying a word. It's great.
It's hard for kids to act for their face. It's hard for anybody to act for their face.
Yeah.
And you can see his resolve harden. And just as the camera fades to black, Percy says, "When do we leave?"
Yep. He's in.
Yep. So I thought this was an awesome second entry in the series. What did you think of it?
I agree. It was much more densely packed than the first episode. A lot more happened. I really enjoyed how they sticked pretty much with the source material. Everything's out of order. Again, I mentioned that before. But I thought it was really well done. The characters are all super well cast, and everything flowed really well.
One thing that I noticed that I thought was interesting, not as a critique in any way, but the explicit references to alcohol.
Yeah, but unexpected.
From Dionysus.
Yeah.
Not usual in more modern Disney stuff.
Not at all.
You know, references, subtle hints, but not an explicit reference to a $500 or $600 bottle of wine.
Right.
In the book, Mr. D doesn't need someone else to go do his bidding. Again, he's a god. He can just summon.
It's true. He can conjure his own wine.
Yeah, I think he even summons his own glass of wine while he's sitting there, and somebody has to remind him, don't forget, Zeus forbade you to drink alcohol.
That's true. I forgot about
That's
that.
what I want the series. I want to know why he's not allowed to drink anymore, because that man looks like he's had too many drinks, and I want to know more about that.
That would be a fantastic series.
It really would. Again, Disney, I will give you my money. I'll watch it.
Absolutely.
Just make it.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the second season of this hasn't been greenlit by Disney yet.
I think it will be. It's doing very well.
I think it'll be very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reviews are amazing. Still over 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is wicked hard to beat.
Yeah. So we're going to see a second season.
I would imagine we will.
Yeah.
That's about all we have time for today, everyone. Thanks for sticking around with us. I know it was a long one today. We just wanted to make sure we gave you as much as we could of the backstory here. How are you guys enjoying the episode? What did you think of everything here? Did you notice any of the Easter eggs, little nods that we didn't talk about? Toss them in the comments below and let us know about it.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us, everybody. We'll be back to break down the third episode entitled We Visit the Garden Gnome Emporium in just a few days. So make sure to subscribe, turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything.
That whole sequence in the book is so much fun. I really hope they do have fun with that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun on screen.
I think so.
Not to repeat fun 9 times, but I think it will be fun.
It's going to be fun.
Hopefully it'll be fun. For now, if you're still here, for whatever reason, check out our breakdowns on the first episode for all the details you might have missed. And as always, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, guys. Until next time, for the Risen Empire, I'm David.
And I am Ethan.
And we'll see you next time.
So long, and thanks for all the fish.